Welcome to a new episode of the XR Magazine podcast. My name is Diana Olenik, your host, and today we're going to be speaking with Juliano Calil, a PhD who is the founder of Virtual Planet Technologies and a pioneer in science communication. His work and academic research are motivated by the urgent need to reduce climate change impacts by adopting equitable solutions through inclusive community engagement. Juliano and his team are developing interactive virtual reality experiences to communicate climate change impacts and solutions to diverse audiences. Virtual Planet is working with communities across the world, including West Palm Beach, Santa Cruz, Long Beach, and Stinson Beach, California, and Germany to address complex issues related to natural disasters such as coastal flooding, wildfires, and heat waves. The episode for today is quite interesting because, as you might be familiar with these technologies, there are not many ones that are addressing this particular issue with climate change and are using it for this type of social impact. I'm so glad that Giuliano agreed to speak to us today. And of course, as always, I can't wait to begin. Let's do it. Thank you so much, Juliano, for being here today with us. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much, Diana. So great to see you today. I'm doing okay today. I live in Santa Cruz here in the central coast of California, and we've been through a kind of a rough patch recently with all these atmospheric rivers. We had like nine of this, huge rainfalls hitting us. So the city's kind of recovering and assessing some of the things, but finally we have some sunshine. So it's a beautiful day over here. So I'm happy to be here with you.
That's amazing. One of these days, I'd like to go and visit because I've heard that it has beautiful scenery. Thank you so much for sharing that. So to get
Yeah.
started, maybe we can discuss a little bit about your background from any point that you want to start. Maybe at the time that you were, I believe you are a PhD in ocean science and coastal adaptation
Right.
and all of that. But from any point that you want to start telling us
Mhm.
to link into how Virtual Planet got started. That would be amazing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'll start a little earlier, but I won't take too long because I was born and raised in Brazil, and I started my career working in information technology, and I was designing decision support systems for about 10 or 12 years. So trying to help big corporations write reports and figure out how to get data from different places and make better decisions. And then in 2000, I moved to the US again to work in tech, and I did that for about 10 years. And then at the end of, I think it was around 2007 or 8, I really got getting a little bit of burnout. I was working as a consultant, traveling a lot, long days. And then I decided to shift careers a little bit. I always had a passion for physics, the environment. So I decided to take a break from work and get a master's in environmental science and management at University of Santa Barbara, UCSB. And then after that, I really liked being in school. I didn't want to go back to work. So I was fortunate to get into a PhD program at UC Santa Cruz. And then I started studying ocean sciences, climate change. I love being near the coast. So I started studying a little bit of the impacts of climate change on coastal communities, not just from a physical standpoint and the problems, but also from a socioeconomic, right? What about the people that live in these areas? How are we going to adapt to a changing climate? And then towards the end of the PhD, I was looking at maybe teaching careers and other opportunities, but I kind of realized there was a big need for new ways of communicating some of the problems. Because just one example, we had a Friday night or Friday afternoon seminars at our department at the university. And then we would have these amazing scientists as guest speakers, and they would come and talk to us and explain what was changing with the climate and different aspects of it. And a lot of the times I couldn't keep up. I wasn't really understanding what they were saying. I was like, well, and I went to that imposter syndrome a little bit. Like, I'm not smart enough to be here. What's happening? But then I started asking my colleagues, and it was kind of a common theme. Unless you're in that very specific field, right? That you're learning marine biologist studying like phytoplankton, then you would kind of get into the research. And granted, that was kind of the goal of those labs, is really to go deep into some of the science. But that's when I think, this idea kind of came to me, right? We were thinking of, I always played video games too, so I was always tuned with interactive. The PlayStation VR was coming out, I think around, I don't remember the year, but it was around 2017, I want to say. But I was playing that, and then the drones came out. I got a drone. I was flying the drone on the coast, taking like this beautiful aerial images, photographs. And then I thought, well, and then I came home. I was playing a game in VR. I was like, whoa, why can't we use some of those beautiful images, bring it into VR, and maybe start communicating some of these issues that way? So that's kind of how I got to the idea. Oh, maybe I can. There's something here, and then I called some people and kind of went from there.
Wow, it sounds amazing because it sounds that it was also born out of a passion yourself, like using these technologies and seeing what could be out of there and mixing it or crossing it, creating this intersection with this problematic that happens sometimes with in certain areas with the climatic change, part of your research and your investigation. So can you tell us a little bit about your implementation, particular implementation of research that you have done now with actually virtual reality and how you started to use it?
Yeah, so we started, and then after I've kind of had that idea, I called some colleagues, and we actually had to wait a little bit because we couldn't do everything we wanted with the Oculus Go when it came out. So when the Quest finally, like, okay, now we can evolve, and we're pushing, the technology to its limits too, because we have this like 3D models that we create and put it in there. So, but the process it's I like to say it's like a co-creation. So we meet with the coastal community, and now actually we're expanding beyond the coast. We can talk a little bit more about that too. But we meet with the community. We understand what their needs are. So, and it's a project is focused on community outreach and engagement. So we want to have a conversation with a specific audience. So we go through this design process of identifying who are we developing this experience for, and what are the key messages and takeaways that we want them to get once they go through that. And normally our projects are in partnerships with local organizations or cities that are on the ground having conversations with the community. So we co-create we do a storyboard of what the experience is going to be. We use a mixture of drone images with we use this process called photogrammetry to create 3D models from 2D images. And then we draft a script for the experience, like what are the key points, how we want to talk about them. And I think it's been like 3 years now that we have a screenwriter on the team as well. So we're really focusing more on the storytelling aspects of the experience and making sure that people can understand and relate how are we touching them from a personal standpoint. So we define the key locations that we're going to show. We show what kind of climate problems we want to attack. So if we look at sea level rise as an example, what time frames are we thinking, and what kind of is it 2 feet or 1 meter or 3 meters of sea level rise, when it's going to happen? And we're always, by the way, very grounded on science. So we don't do, we don't show cities underwater just for, as a communication tool, because it's not going to happen in our lifetime. So like, well, let's focus on what's pressing, what's coming in the next, 30 to 50 years, and also focus on some of the solutions. So we identify all those different components of the experience. We write the scripts. We collect the data on the field. That's one of the things I was lucky enough to be able to retain. I do all the drone flights myself still most of the time. And we kind of put it all together. We use a Unity engine for the experience, and then we have the narration too. We want to make sure that everything we do is inclusive. So we always have at least two languages, English and Spanish. And we just did a recent project in Florida where we had Creole, Haitian Creole as a language, and it turned out it was great. We had some challenges to make everything fit, like the timing of the narration is very different in different languages. So that's kind of, we go through this localization kind of process to make sure that the cultural references are right. And then we create the experience, we deploy them with our partners on the ground. So it's very common that we have community meetings, we have workshops, we bring several headsets, and then we structure these meetings where there's usually an introduction from someone from the city, maybe a city planner or a climate action person. So we even had sometimes the mayor comes in to introduce the event. And then we have everyone go through the experience on the headsets. And typically we have 15, 20 headsets on those meetings. We go through an hour or so, we get 40 people through it. And then we have a guided activity, a discussion about it. Because VR can be very introspective, individual experience, right? So we kind of bring everyone out of that. Like, okay, now let's talk to your fellow friends, your neighbors, your folks from the city, and let's talk about what can be done, how you can get engaged in the conversation as well. And that's all through that immersive power of VR, where you can actually see some of potential futures, right? So we try to make it in a way that inspires people to like, oh, this is something, okay, I like that idea, but I have questions. What about this? So we find that conversations are much richer after they go through the VR compared to traditional communication methods. And I can talk a little bit more about the research we're doing on that too. But
yeah, definitely. It's super, super interesting because it actually takes, as you mentioned, the highlight into consideration the opinion of the final user, the community, and engage them inside to create this type of brainstorming of ideas on how the problem can be tackled around involving
yes.
everybody, not just the city planning, making their own decisions, isolated, which typically that happens in government sections, that they made their decisions based on the problematic or designs that are standards. But the community is actually the major part of how the success of a project can come to, to fruit or not. So I want to highlight that this is giving the opportunity to that, and that you are using this for actually these plans that can help not only for the city, but as well for the communities. So in terms of the actual problematic or actual situations that happen, could you expand a little bit more on the research and this part that you mentioned that have been the fit part into the process of the creation of the experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something I'm very passionate about, research as well, in education. I still teach a class on coastal management in the fall. So we made a partnership with a group at Stanford, the Virtual Human Interaction Lab. And we wrote a peer-reviewed article last year about the use of our VR tools in community engagement and sea level rise. And it was I can send you the link to the paper. It was a great review of the literature of how virtual reality is being used to create pro-social behavior change, to create empathy, but also in disaster preparedness. And so there's some good references and some studies that have been done in the past that we're finding similar results through our research as well, showing where you see things in virtual reality, it physiologically, even you react as of what you're seeing is real, right? I think our audience here is very familiar with that feeling, right? That VR kind of moment and everyone has that one moment that most people can relate to is like, oh, I saw that in VR, and that's when it hit me. It's like, oh, I'm in this place, or the emotion that came with that it sticks with people, right? So we've been using the technology very kind of carefully to design those experiences in ways that people come out of it with like inspired to be part of the conversation and to take action, because it's climate change is such a daunting issue, and it also accelerates so many other problems that we're already having to tackle, that it can be very easily to fall into despair and curl into a ball and like, I can't deal with this, right? So we try to make it interesting and interactive, and always focusing on the solutions at the end of the experience, so people can come out of it with more inspiration. And there is a researcher from King's College in London, Cruz, and he's doing some really interesting research on how we make decisions and polarization and things like that. And he found that more than 98% of all the stories related to the environment are negative in nature, right? And it's kind of expected, because everything is a little bit of a mess right now. But if you really want to get people inspired and bring them back to the conversation, we really need to focus on the storytelling aspect. So that's another part of research that we're incorporating and trying to make more like telling the story. There's someone that lives on our most recent experience in Florida. We're looking at the impacts of sea level rise in 3 parks that are owned by the city. And then we interviewed locals, and we got, what do you like about this park? And then we show them an image of the park flooded. And I was like, oh my God, I bring my kids to play here. Where are we going to go? And then at the end, we bring back, oh, what if we would restore this in a different way? What do you think of that? And then we have someone say, oh, wow, my kids are going to love it. Or, my dog, I bring my dog here. This is great. So we try to relate some of these big issues with daily lives as well. And VR allows us to do that, right? You can move into different scales. You can show different futures. So it's been, and we're continuing to do the research. Right now, we're working at the Florida Atlantic University on a research project, looking at the impacts of going through this experience in virtual reality versus using a tablet. So we have a questionnaire that we're going to interview folks and measure there's a lot of variables that we're measuring to see, how it changes their learning, their perception about that issue, their sense of agency and auto-efficacy regarding the issue, and confidence to discuss it, and all those things that are, I think, are key for us to continue to develop some of these tools in more inclusive ways as well.
Yeah, that sounds very, very exciting. All the projects that are coming up and that you continue to work with. So in terms of during the design of the experience and even the production of the experience, what have been maybe, I can, every time that I ask this, there might be many, but one of the most relevant, or one or two main challenges that you have faced at creating this type of climatic change experiences for people?
I think there are a couple of things. One that's kind of surprising, but it's not, and I think it speaks to the power of VR as a communication technology, because we use 2D maps, like Google Maps, visuals, to select the flooding scenarios, for instance, that we're going to show in VR. And then we decide, it's usually like a quick meeting. It's like, yeah, we're planning for, 3 feet of sea level rise by 2050 or something like that. So here are the maps that we use on our planning scenarios. Then we send this to our artists, and they do these renderings that they're like on photographs, 3D images or 3D models. They're very realistic. And then we bring this back to proof, and then make the review. And I think 9 out of 10 times people think, oh no, this is wrong. This is not right. It's like they put a headset and look, no, this can't be right, because it's too much. It's like, well, it's not. See, the map that you've been using for the last 10 years is the same data. You're just seeing it in a different way. So that usually, there are some cases where we stop the project and we're going to revise the models because they think, well, that can't. So that's one interesting and kind of unexpected challenge that we found, but just good, because then people get to think, I think, better, more carefully about the models that they're looking at. Right. I also found through some of the meetings that there's many people can't process maps the way that most of us can. And it's like, I've been with meetings where we show them a 2D map, like a Google map with a blue area showing some projected flood, and that wouldn't register. So there's something that when you look at this powerful images now, it all of a sudden it hits, and I was like, oh yeah, I get this now. So that's one. The other thing, I think the technology is still, I think, new, very new to some folks. There are some towns where we go that some folks that we work with that are not really into the technology. So there's a little barrier on the language and explaining what the deliverables are, the scope of the project. And when we say things like, well, it's a 360 aerial view taken from a drone versus a 3D model. All these concepts, sometimes it's hard to get until we're closer to the end, right? So that's another challenge that we're thinking. And at the beginning, the logistics of the events, it was a bit of a challenge too, but I think now we have a good procedure and process to really get many people through the headsets in a meaningful way and have the conversation in a relatively short amount of time too. So that's another.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. When you particularly mention the difficulty for some people to interact with the 2D maps, I totally relate. My profession is engineering. I'm an engineer, actually. And so the process of sometimes being in construction and having the 2D plans, like for the construction, is difficult for you to imagine the elevations, the new elevations of new buildings or new stuff that is going to be placed there, or even when it's underground, when there is underground and you have to imagine right now, which something that is for me is like, I'm amazed at how humans have to evolve all the time, is that up to right now, all the engineering work and buildings that we've seen in the world have been built like that. A little bit of imagination, and still with precision, with certain precision, which is amazing, because not every single human being have the same capability of the spatial sense or the imagining what exactly things can be. Of course, there is surveying, there is all of these things that have been helping, of course, but I feel that the drone technologies, the LiDAR scans, all of these new technologies are revolutionizing now how for engineering and construction and design, and as well for sciences, like the practice that you have, helping in the understanding, and for people, the communities, to understand what these elevations mean, like, or for the ocean, like what is going to be the impact, or what is going to be the potential levels that could be in 20 years, 30 years, what are we going to do about it? So that's what I love about virtual, that really can show that future, it can show it now. So that's what is going to make better people like to take different actions. And I'm super excited that you have been supported by the government, or like the local organizations, local and external organizations, because typically it is a little bit more difficult for government agencies to try to understand this as well. Everybody's learning at this point, but I'm so glad that you've been supported by them, and it's such a good example that we can showcase every time about how other local organizations or external organizations can learn from that example and start the applications of these, particularly climate change applications from now. That's amazing.
Thank you.
I wanted to highlight that. And as well, you have a couple of particular experiences that you have created. I like to know why these ones, like which ones are those ones, why those ones, and what is coming up.
Oh, absolutely. So a lot that we talked about is our Sea Level Rise Explorer platform that focus on coastal issues and focus on sea level rise, coastal storms, coastal erosion, and other issues that are affecting towns. So I think we're working on our 10th city now, so it's been kind of a really rewarding process. I was looking at some of the analytics last week, and we just hit 10,000 unique users across the experiences, which I was blown away. I did not, when we started, it's like, well, if we can get a couple hundred people to see this that live in the town, that's going to be amazing. So I think I can only speculate the impact of having 10,000 people experiencing this issue and looking at solutions. So I'm hoping this will propagate some good positive impact. We did in 2019 because wildfires here in California is such a big problem as well, and Canada and Australia, Portugal. I mean, it's global now. But we reached out to the town of Paradise. There was a devastating wildfire there in 2018. So we created with them and our colleagues from the Nature Conservancy, which is a large nonprofit organization here in the U.S. We created a wildfire experience as well. And that was super interesting because the folks in the city they asked us to create a scene where you're in the forest as the fire comes. And I was really worried about that. I was like, well, that's going to trigger people. And like, you really want to do that? I was like, well, we'll make sure that folks that live here know that that's going to be included. But if you haven't seen or experienced, people have no concept what that's like. So we worked with them and we created a wildfire version that was really good. I think it had a good impact as well. And we again talk about solutions, right? Maybe we can create buffers about some of this around some of these towns that are on in wildland, what we call the urban wildland interface here. Or maybe you don't rebuild in the same spot, or what can you do, right? So always thinking of solutions. We did create a great experience called Dive, which is a class. Actually, we got a grant from a government action here in California to look at marine protected areas. So there's like national parks underwater. So we created an experience with an animated sea lion. Her name is Marina, and it's for kids. And she talks about the MPAs, marine protected areas. There is a class curriculum that goes with it. So our partners with Save Our Shores, the local nonprofit, they have 30 headsets and they go through all the like local schools and they teach a class. The kids put the headsets on, and then they talk about marine protected areas, why they're important, what can you do there. That hopefully sparks some career interests on them as well.
Yeah.
And then what's coming next? We're working on a really cool project. I'm super excited. It's called Sensorium. So the idea is to create a combination. It's going to be a physical art installation, but also a virtual reality version, where the end state is gonna have a conversation with the oceans to understand what's happening, right? But for the first phase, we're creating this immersive visuals focusing on some key issues that are affecting our global oceans now: so overfishing, ocean acidification, pollution. So we're sea level rise even on the coasts. So we're creating this powerful images. So you're going to go through this installation with sound and projections. And we're collaborating with the Center of Force Majeure at the UC Santa Cruz on that, and also the Allosphere, which is a really good kind of physical installation as well at UC Santa Barbara. So we're in the process of creating some of the scenes and working through that. And also working with a couple of other local towns on sea level rise and some coastal issues now with the in lieu of this terrible weather that we had, right? All this rain that I was mentioning when we started. So everyone's kind of, well, what happened? It's like, it's been, I don't think anyone that lives here and even long timers have ever seen such like tremendous impact in one season, right? So we're like, what can be done? And I'm also working with the city on another kind of side project, super exciting, looking at creating a monitoring network on the coast of our city with cameras and sensors and drones and other things, so we can measure these changes over time and figure, okay, now when is the time to take action? So what are the triggers and what adaptation options? And we're thinking of creating a VR experience for that, where you choose your own adventure. So you start in 2020 and then you're in 2025 and the beach is flooding now. So what do you want to do? You want to build a seawall, or you want to raise the houses or add sand to and then you do that and you see that future happening. And then you go 20 years in the future, like, oh, that was not a good idea, because so you learn about trade-offs and in an interactive and immersive way too. So that's another one that I'm looking forward to kind of kickstarting.
Wow, I'm super excited about those ones. And actually, I find very interesting the use of data and feeding the data into the experience for like more informed decisions, not only from, the community, which is the educational part, but the actual science, right? Like to combine them actually. not just having the data and read the data and then go do something, but also inside the actual with the sensors and everything and see it in real time and all of that. I am very excited
And
about this.
through storytelling, right? That's
Yeah.
the other thing. You don't. Our goal is that you come out of this experience engaged with the issue, but not realizing that you just spent like 5-7 minutes learning about sea level rise, right? That's not. It's really like, okay, let's talk about this in a way that makes sense. So
Yes, it's just like experiential, not necessarily theory, but the experiential. Yes, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you so much. It's been absolutely great to hear about all of these experiences that you're creating. Where can people reach out to you or experience this or get to know more about how they can contribute, how they can try anything from Virtual Planet, and to, understand more the impact of climate change through VR?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is virtualplanet.tech. So there's all our experiences are there. You can try the 360 films. There are links to download the VR experiences as well. We also have mobile applications too. And also my email. So either Juliano Calil at gmail.com or Juliano at virtualplanet.tech. And yeah, looking forward, always open to talk about this and always curious about learning new ways that we can partner and collaborate. A lot of our projects come from people that call me like, hey, we're thinking of something, what do you think? And then we come up with an idea together. Sometimes we go after the funds together and then we get to do it. So it's a really great process.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of these insights, your experience, the journey, and how you are contributing to the world to make it a better place for everybody. So I really love this type of experiences, as I mentioned at the beginning, social impact experiences, in applications of science. All of this is super exciting, and this is a very particular example about that. Thank you so much for taking the time to explain us and educate us today.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much, and see you in the next episode. Bye for now.